ready to maybe change how you think about success.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
We're diving into work less, achieve more.
Okay.
And it basically says you don't have to be hustling all the time to get ahead.
Huh.
That sometimes a little laziness could actually help you unlock your potential.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Sounds kind of crazy, right?
It does, a little bit.
But stick with us.
Okay, I'm in.
It's funny because we're so used to thinking that working a ton means you're successful.
Totally.
But Ernie Zielinski, he's the author, makes a really interesting argument.
Okay.
He says working smarter, not just harder, can get you more success.
Interesting.
Indeed, maybe even more important, more enjoyment out of life.
I like where this is going.
So, chapter 1, right off the bat, he asks this question.
Okay.
Why do we work more than necessary?
Yeah, why do we?
It's like we do it to ourselves.
Right.
Well, he says it's partly because our culture is kind of obsessed with hard work equaling success.
That makes sense.
We're all about being busy, like it's a badge of honor.
Yeah, it's true.
And then that leads to overworking and burning ourselves out.
Definitely.
But here's the thing.
What's that?
Working more doesn't always mean you achieve more.
Oh, interesting.
It can actually backfire. You think you're being super productive by like pulling all-nighters?
Yeah.
But are you really?
Good point.
It's like being on one of those hamster wheels.
Uh-huh.
You're running and running, but going nowhere.
I've been there.
To show this, he tells this story about a businessman.
Okay.
This guy was constantly stressed and working way too much.
Sounds rough.
Putting in crazy hours. But his productivity was actually tanking.
Wow.
So finally, he just decides to change things up completely.
Good for him.
Cut back his hours and made time for rest and relaxation.
Yeah.
Not only was he less stressed,
That's good.
but he was more productive. Angely creative.
No way.
It was like giving his mind a break was exactly what he needed.
Makes you think.
So it's not about more hours.
Right.
It's about using the hours you have better. And those breaks, they're not just about avoiding burnout.
Okay.
They're actually key to succeeding.
Interesting.
And that kind of leads us to work-life balance.
Gotcha.
Zielinski talks about it in chapter 2.
Okay.
And he says it's not just some like fluffy idea.
Yeah.
It's actually super important for success and happiness. He thinks that leisure time isn't just about chilling out.
Okay.
It actually helps you be more productive and creative.
So you're telling me taking time off can actually make me better at my job?
That's exactly what he's saying.
Wow.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
When you let your mind rest and recharge,
Yeah.
you come back to work with a fresh perspective and you've got more energy.
I can see that.
It's like hitting the reset button on your brain.
Nice.
Things become clearer. You find new solutions.
Solutions you wouldn't have thought of when you were stuck in that hamster wheel.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
You know what else he talks about?
What's that?
This story about a fashion designer.
Oh, tell me.
She was totally burned out.
I hate that feeling.
No new ideas, no inspiration, basically on the verge of a breakdown.
Oof. That's rough.
Her doctor was like, you need a vacation, like now.
Oh, really?
Forced her to take time off.
And
She comes back,
yeah.
overflowing with inspiration.
No way.
The time away let her mind wander, make new connections,
That's amazing.
and she came back to work feeling totally refreshed.
So maybe those vacation days are more important than we think.
Right.
It's like they're not just a nice to have, they're a must have.
Totally.
It sounds like making time for things you enjoy outside of work.
Yeah.
It's just as important as all those deadlines.
Absolutely.
This is definitely making me rethink how I see downtime.
Me too.
It's a big shift in perspective, isn't it?
It is.
We're so used to thinking we have to be on all the time to succeed.
Yeah. Always hustling.
But what Zielinski is saying is that real productivity,
Yeah.
it comes from working in a sustainable way, not burning yourself out.
Makes total sense.
So you're on board with working less.
For sure.
But how do we achieve more?
Right. That's the real question.
How do we work smarter, not just harder?
That's what Zielinski tackles in chapter 3.
Okay, tell me more.
One of the biggest things, he says, is to prioritize.
Makes sense.
Focus on the tasks that really get you closer to your goals,
Okay.
not just doing busy work.
I can see that trap.
He calls this strategic effort.
Strategic effort. I like that.
So it's about doing the right work, not just more work.
Right. Quality over quantity.
Any examples from the book that show this in action?
There's a good one about a salesperson.
Okay.
This guy was struggling to meet his targets.
Oh, no.
He was making a ton of calls, but not seeing the results he wanted.
Hmm.
He realized he was spreading himself too thin.
Oh, I've been there.
So he changed his strategy, focused on the customers who were actually likely to buy.
Instead of trying to reach everyone.
Exactly.
Did it work?
His sales shot way up.
Wow, so simple but effective.
It was just a small change in focus.
But made a huge difference.
Totally.
So it's about being strategic, not just busy.
Absolutely.
What stood out to you from that story?
It reminds me that sometimes doing less can actually get you better results.
Interesting.
As long as you're putting your energy in the right places.
I see.
We always think more effort means more success.
Yeah, that's what we're taught.
But it's not always true.
Okay, so we've talked about working less, taking breaks, and focusing on the right tasks.
It's all starting to make sense.
But what about happiness?
Yeah, where does that fit in?
Can we be successful and happy?
Right, or do we have to choose?
Exactly. Are those two things like opposites?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And that's what Zelensky tackles in Chapter 4.
What does he say?
He challenges this idea that success requires sacrifice.
You mean like we have to grind and put our personal lives on hold
Exact.
to reach our goals?
Yeah, that's a message we hear a lot.
So is Zelensky saying we can have it all?
Well, he's not saying it's easy, but he believes that going after success shouldn't make you unhappy.
Yeah, okay.
In fact, he says finding joy outside of work actually makes you more successful in the long run.
So it's not one or the other.
Nope, they can go together.
Okay, I like that.
He gives an example of this really successful businesswoman.
Okay.
She was killing it in her career,
But
she was deeply unhappy.
oh,
She was so focused on work that she totally neglected her personal life.
sounds familiar.
Eventually, she realized something had to change.
What'd she do?
She started making time for her family, picked up some old hobbies,
Nice.
basically rediscovered what made her happy outside of work.
Did it help?
Not only was she happier, but she also had more energy for work and was more engaged.
Wow, so ignoring your personal life can actually hold you back.
That's right.
Both personally and professionally.
It's a good reminder that we're not just machines meant to work all the time.
Right. We have lives outside of that.
We're human beings with, complex lives.
Sure.
And finding fulfillment in all those areas is crucial.
To being happy and successful.
Exactly.
This is really eye-opening.
Glad to hear it.
I feel like I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
That's great.
Before we go any further, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll dive into some real-life success stories from the book.
Sounds good.
And we'll see how these ideas have worked for other people.
I'm ready for that.
Still tuned?
I will. Welcome back.
Okay, so we've been talking about some pretty big changes.
Right, like working less and resting more.
Making time for things that make you happy.
Yeah, and prioritizing what matters most.
Exactly.
Well, in Chapter 5, Zelensky takes it even further.
How so?
He shows us real people who've actually done this,
Really?
achieved incredible success by embracing these ideas.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Stories are always so powerful, right?
Totally.
It's one thing to hear about a concept,
Yeah,
but seeing it in action is a whole different ballgame.
absolutely. So tell me, what are some of the stories that stood out to you?
Well, there's this one about a tech entrepreneur.
Okay.
He decided to try something kind of radical.
What's that?
He reduced his team's work hours.
Really? What happened?
He was worried productivity would tank.
Makes sense.
But the results were the opposite.
What?
Their productivity stayed the same.
No way.
And their creativity and innovation actually increased.
That's amazing. So working less made them more creative.
It did. It's like giving them space to breathe actually helped them do their best work.
That's interesting.
Have you ever noticed that in your own work?
Sometimes, yeah.
Like you get your best ideas when you're not even working.
Totally. It's like when you step away from a problem,
Yeah,
your brain just keeps working on it in the background.
exactly. And then boom, you have a breakthrough.
Like those aha moments in the shower or when you're out for a walk.
Exactly.
So by working less, we're actually giving ourselves more chances for those moments to happen.
That's the idea.
Wow, that's really cool.
It all comes down to prioritizing well-being, not just your to-do list.
Because what's the point of being successful if you're miserable?
Right, exactly.
Zelensky's saying we need to create a life that's aligned with our values.
Yeah, and that brings us joy.
Okay, I'm on board for that.
These examples show it's possible
To have both.
to achieve success and live a fulfilling life.
That's what I want.
It's a powerful message.
Have you seen this kind of shift in your own life?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What was that like?
Early in my career, I was all about working long hours.
To prove yourself.
Yeah, I thought that's what it took.
I think a lot of people do that.
It led to so much stress and burnout.
Been there.
But as I learned more about productivity and balance,
What did you change?
I started prioritizing tasks, setting boundaries around work,
Good for you.
and making time for things I enjoyed outside of work.
Did it make a difference?
It was a total game changer.
Really?
I'm more productive now, more creative, and way happier.
It sounds like you found that balance.
It's a journey, but definitely worth it.
Zelensky's book seems like a great guide for that.
Absolutely.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation.
It has.
I feel like I'm already changing how I think about work and success.
That's fantastic.
So, as we wrap up, what are some key things you hope our listeners will take away?
Well, first, I hope they'll consider that working less might actually lead to more success.
It sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but it's backed up by research and real-life stories.
Right, we've seen that.
Second, I hope they'll think about their priorities and make conscious choices about their time.
Like take control and create a life that works for them,
Exactly.
instead of letting their to-do list run the show.
Right.
And lastly, I hope they'll remember that rest and leisure aren't luxuries. They're essential.
To being happy and productive,
I love that.
they go hand in hand.
Before we move on to part 3, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay, that's that.
If you could work less without sacrificing success, what would you do with the extra time?
It's a big question.
How would you design your ideal day or week?
Something to think about.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll dive into this even more.
I'm looking forward to it.
And we'll give you some strategies to actually make these changes in your own life. Back for the final part of our deep dive into work less, achieve more.
Okay.
We left you with a big question.
Right, about that extra time.
What would you do if you could work less without, hurting your success?
It's a tough one.
It is. It makes you really think about what matters.
It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day
Totally.
and forget to think about the bigger picture.
Zelensky's book really makes you stop and reevaluate.
What are you working for? Why?
Exactly.
It's about more than just checking things off a list.
Right. It's about creating a life that you actually want.
A life that's aligned with what you believe in.
So let's say someone's listening and they're like, okay, I'm in, I want this.
Yeah.
They want to work less, achieve more, find that balance.
Where do they start?
It can feel overwhelming.
It can.
What's the first step?
First, you gotta figure out your priorities.
Okay.
The things that really matter to you.
Not just work stuff.
Right, like spending time with family and friends.
Pursuing a hobby, maybe.
Giving back to your community.
Yeah, find what brings you joy outside of work.
And then structure your life around those things.
So that could mean setting boundaries with work.
Totally.
Learning to say no to things that don't fit your goals.
Yeah.
Or even delegating tasks. It's about making choices that support the life you want.
Being intentional with your time and energy.
You know what else Zelensky talks about?
As that.
Simplifying your life.
Oh yeah, decluttering.
We have so much clutter, physical and mental.
It weighs you down.
It does. I've been trying to declutter my space lately.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much lighter I feel.
It frees up mental space too.
Yeah, more clarity, creativity, even joy.
It all connects back to finding joy outside of work.
Zelensky really hammers that point home.
He does.
It's crucial for your well-being and success.
When you're happy in your personal life, yeah,
It shows up in your work too.
you're more energized, engaged, creative.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
Totally.
So make time for the things that light you up.
Like spending time in nature,
Connecting with loved ones.
being creative, or just resting.
Give yourself permission to recharge.
It's not just about those external things.
Like promotions or money.
Right. It's about living a life that feels meaningful.
A life that's fulfilling.
I think Zelensky's book is a great reminder of that.
It challenges you to step off that hamster wheel.
And create a life that truly works for you.
It's an inspiring message.
It is. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
To our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about.
And maybe even a little hope.
Remember, you can achieve great things without burning yourself out.
Work smarter, not harder.
Prioritize what matters.
Make time for joy.
And if you want more inspiration, definitely check out Work Less, Achieve More.
It's worth the read.
Until next time, happy diving.